All right, welcome everybody. I hope you can all hear me okay. Jericho, if you would just give me a thumbs up that you're still hearing me fine. Perfect. Thank you for being with us. We're very excited to be here together for this event. This is the Purdue Black Cultural Center's third Arts as Activism circle. So excited to be here with Pulitzer winner Jericho Brown. His work is just phenomenal. I'm so excited to listen, to learn, and to share this with the community that's here in this circle with us today. A little bit of housekeeping. Feel free to add questions, comments, thoughts in the chat, and I will facilitate a Q&A with Jericho at the end of his sharing. As many of those as we can. I'm sure you all are going to have some fantastic questions and comments. I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. There will also be a quick survey that I'll post at the end. We just want to make sure that we are providing the community with the programming that's best for you, that you want, especially in this time of many of us being physically distant. We're trying to use our virtual space responsibly. So please take a moment to fill out that survey and let us know what it is that you need for us and how we can best support you. The BCC, the Purdue Black Cultural Center, is 51 years old this year, and so we are constantly learning from our community. Your feedback is very important. So let me introduce Jericho. This is just so exciting. Jericho Brown is the recipient of a Whiting Writers Award and fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Brown's first book in 2008 was Please, which won the American Book Award. His second book in 2014 was The New Testament, which won the Anisfield Wolf Book Award and was named one of the best of the year by the Library Journal, Cold Front, the Academy of American Poets. He's the author of a collection from 2019 called The Tradition, which is one that I just absolutely love, which was a finalist for the 2019 National Book Award and the winner of the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. I feel like we should just give you like a round of applause right now. His poems have appeared in BuzzFeed, The Nation, New York Times, The New Yorker, The New Republic, Time, and the Pushcart Prize Anthology, and several volumes of the Best American Poetry anthologies. He's also an associate professor and the director of the creative writing program at Emory University in Atlanta. So thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to share my screen with you now.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody hear me just fine? It seems like, I never know with Zoom. It seems like there are 20 of us. Is that true? I hope so, because then this will be so much. Oh, wait, I think I hit the wrong button. Did I make something happen just now? Do y'all see like a Zoom? Did I do that? Nobody's talking to me. Denicia, you're like muted. Do y'all see the screen? Can y'all make the screen go away? It says I'm viewing. Y'all don't see that screen.
Let's see.
So I need to make that go away. Oh, you do see it. I don't know where it came. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I did that, but maybe I did that. Hi. So I wanted to, who were the first two? You said I was the third in the circle?
Yes, and so we've had Manon Voice and Adrian Matejka.
Oh, okay, cool. So I wanted to do something. The exhortation here was that I talk about ways my work impacts the world, particularly as it relates to social and racial justice, which is very difficult for me to do because I feel like I have no barometer for the way my work is impacting whatever we might think of as the world in any given moment. That's not to say that I don't understand me being able to make what I make doesn't make it possible for others to be able to make what they make. I completely understand that, as a Black poet, but all the more particularly as a queer Black poet from the South, that I began to, without even trying, just by the fact of identity, open the doors of possibility for other people because I do what I do. I always think it's my job to make sure I do what I do without thinking about that, though, because if I think about that, then I won't be able to be honest in what I do. Um, so instead, I thought that I would talk about, um, I really just wanted to talk about poems that I have been affected by, or poems that have had an impact on me in the way that I think about poems when I'm reading them and when I think about them. So I'll just share maybe, I think maybe 4 poems, maybe 5 poems, 3 poems with y'all if y'all don't mind. It's so weird being on Zoom because I can't hear anything. And I really just want to like shake everybody's hand and hug everybody. I just got very suddenly self-conscious. I realized there's a bed in my background. I hope that's not driving anybody up the wall. I'm at a hotel. I had to come to the Mayo Clinic because I have some persisting health issues and I didn't think that I would actually be here. So I'm actually really excited like that. I'm literally talking to y'all right now. But then I just want more. I just want to touch you, but I can't touch you. It's okay. So I just wanted to start, if it's okay with y'all, with just a few poems. And we'll start with this poem by Jean Valentine. This is a poem called Black for the People, and I'll read it for you. Black for the people. The man I am with is black. We are with nothing but white men. He's caught, he says. They're going to shock him or burn him. I say I'll be there, but I'm not him. He has to go into a machine where 2 white men put him. The machine saws loud into his back, 3, 4 inches into his back. Then they let him go. Not wanting him alive, not wanting him dead. Their knees grind over the sea and make malice. What is love? What does love do? I think that's great. I don't know if y'all are having a problem after reading that poem, but every time I read this poem, I have a problem. I'm very angry with Jean Valentine. And one of the things I love about this poem is just how strange it gets as we are reading it. That line by line, it gets more and more strange to the point where he has to go into a machine where 2 white men put him. The machine saws loud into his back, 3, 4 inches into his back. Then they let him go. Earlier in the poem, I think this is also, I think of when I read poems, I always think about Keats and how he would sort of laugh at us if he heard us say speaker all the time. I think it's important to know that Jean Valentine is a white woman, or the first few lines of this poem don't really work in the way that I think she means for them to work. The man I am with is black. We are with nothing but white men. So we have these very different identities and positions and subjectivities working in the same place at the same time. And yet she is saying there is nothing she can do about these situations. But what really attracts me to this poem, and one of the ways that I understood that it began to change me and change my thinking, was their knees grind over the sea and make malice, which does not make sense and won't work in any creative writing workshop, because knees don't grind. Knees don't make malice. Do you know what I'm saying? And so she's reaching, I think, in that moment. And it's very inspiring for me. And it taught me something about being surreal, and how when you're living in a world that you keep being told, we live in a world where we are often told that that which is mundane, that which is surreal is mundane, right? That which is normal, that we're supposed to believe that this is the everyday and this is the normal, right? And so then we have to also believe that putting kids in cages is the everyday, is the normal, that drones are the everyday, are the normal. And so there's something about this moment where she's trying to reach for, I mean, in that moment, I think she gets at colonialism, evangelism, I mean, so many things. And there's literal water you have to travel in order to make it happen. And then there's this final move. It reminds me of Robert Hayden's Those Winter Sundays, a poem I wish I had time to talk about, but I won't talk about right now. But it's similar. What is love? That moment at the end of the Hayden poem is, what did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? And this moment at the end of this poem is, what is love? What does love do? And it's, I believe it to be a real question and a real hope. at the end of this poem. So I'll move to the just sort of thinking about that, you know, having read that poem, reading it over the years, and how it's changed for me, and how I've allowed the fact of these words on the screen to make an impact in my own life. Because this is really what I believe about poems. They impact us much more individually than they do as a group. Now, if we can get the poems out to enough people in the group, maybe we can have some group poems. And I do believe that we have some poems in common. But I think that poems ask to talk to us directly. They want an intimate moment between a two, and that is the poet and the person reading the poem. So I'll go, I think if I just minimize this, can y'all see that? Yes, can somebody nod if they can see it? Okay, this is a poem by Bruce Weigel. It's called The Impossible. And I think it's a little small, but I think you'll be able to follow along if I read it. The Impossible.
The screen is stuck, Jericho.
You can't see it? So I think I have to start over every time then. Okay, how do I, maybe if I, resume, I have to hit resume share. Sorry, y'all give me just a second, I'm learning. Maybe I have to stop share. Yeah, and I have to share all over again. Okay, there it is. Do y'all see that?
Yep.
There's a poem by Bruce Weigel called The Impossible. Winter's last rain and a light I don't recognize through the trees, and I come back in my mind to the man who made me suck his cock when I was 7 in sunlight between boxcars. I thought I could leave him standing there in the years, half smile on his lips, small hands curled into small fists. But after he finished, he held my hand in his as if astonished, until the houses were visible just beyond the rail yard. He held my hand, but before that he slapped me hard on the face when I would not open my mouth for him. I do not want to say his whole hips slammed into me, but they did. And a black wave washed over my brain, changing me, so I could not move among my people in the old way. On my way home, I stopped in the churchyard to try and find a way to stay alive. In the branches, a red wing flitted, warning me. In the rectory, Father prepared the body and blood for Mass, but God could not save me from a mouthful of cum. That afternoon, some lives turned away from the light. He taught me how to move my tongue around. In his hands, he held my head like a lover. Say it clearly, and you make it beautiful, no matter what. So again, a poem that, although this is not a question, I think ends in a question. And the question here is, did that actually happen? Given the information we have in this poem, is that the truth? Say it clearly and you make it beautiful no matter what. I've always thought of this poem as a kind of ars poetica, or a poem about poetry, or a poem about the writing of poetry and what poets are indeed trying to do. And one of the things that I always notice about this poem is that there's a relationship between nature, which save for the seasons, is pretty much unchanging, right? There's this moment, winter's last rain and a light I don't recognize, is how this poem begins. And so just because of a situation where there's rain, or a situation where there's a smell, or a light, and a memory has been triggered, right? So again, I'm sort of interested in how the traumatic moment can be happening in the midst of mundanity. And also this moment for me, the beginning in the second strophe, I do not want to say his whole hip slammed into me, but they did. It's a really beautiful moment where, if we take the last line to be true, he seems to be quite literally, in a very postmodern way, quite literally fighting against what he needs to say to make the poem happen, and showing us the fight. I do not want to say his whole hip slammed into me, but they did. And a black wave washed over my brain, changing me. So I could not move among my people in the old way, which I think is absolutely amazing, that something has happened to the speaker of this poem. And so his position in his community is changed. And he cannot see himself in the same way, even among his, what he calls my people. Again, a very important poem for me, and one that I think about often, in terms of impact, in terms of just changing my mind about the way I see things. This is a poem. Well, I got to do it again. Sorry. Let's start over. This is a poem by Yusef Komunyakaa. It's called Thanks. Yusef Komunyakaa is from Louisiana, where I'm from, and I've always been proud of him. When I was a kid, I would read Yusef Komunyakaa poems, not understanding a word of them, but I knew that there was this Black poet who won a Pulitzer Prize who was from Louisiana. And so I would just walk around. I mean, literally, when I was in high school, I would recite Yusef Komunyakaa poems, not understanding a word of them. But I think I have some understanding of this one, which I'll recite for you now. Thanks. Thanks for the tree between me and a sniper's bullet. I don't know what made the grass sway seconds before the Viet Cong raised his soundless rifle. Some voice always followed, telling me which foot to put down first. Thanks for deflecting the ricochet against the anarchy of dusk. I was back in San Francisco, wrapped up in a woman's wild colors, causing some dark bird's love call to be shattered by daylight, when my hands reached up and pulled a branch away from my face. Thanks for the vague white flower that pointed to the gleaming metal, reflecting how it is to be broken, like mist over the grass, as we played some deadly game for blind gods. What made me spot the monarch writhing on a single thread, tied to a farmer's gate, holding the day together like an unfingered guitar string, is beyond me. Maybe the hills grew weary and leaned a little in the heat. Again, thanks for the dud hand grenade tossed at my feet. Outside you lie. I'm still falling through its silence. I don't know why the intrepid sun touched the bayonet, but I know that something stood among those lost trees and moved only when I moved. So gorgeous, isn't that? I think that's really good. I have a lot to say about this poem, but I'll save everything for this moment. So in terms of the dramatic situation of this poem, there are all these near-death experiences that the speaker is having in the midst of a literal war. And part of the thanks, this repetition of thanks, is I wasn't even paying attention. I was thinking about something I should not have been thinking about, and somehow I did not die. But this moment, I'm telling y'all, this completely changed. I mean, I think I'm a person capable of falling in love because of this moment. He says, thanks for deflecting the ricochet against that anarchy of dusk. What was I doing in the midst of the ricochet? I was back in San Francisco, wrapped up in a woman's wild colors, causing some dark bird's love call to be shattered by daylight when my hands reached up and pulled a branch away from my face. So he was literally thinking about making love, which is possible for us, even in the midst of war. Isn't that something? Don't you just feel a little more saved? And it's also about, I think this moment, I think a lot of the poem has to do with the fact that memory can offer us comfort and redemption, which had huge impact for me. Now, let me say this other thing. When I understood that about the poem, I better understood that that was possible in anybody. So therefore, that was possible no matter who I loved. And so that was very important to me. So stop share. Okay, we're almost done. I'm gonna read my poems in a second. Y'all know I'm a college professor, so I just like to. Here's a poem by Margaret Atwood. This is a photograph of me. It was taken some time ago. At first, it seems to be a smeared print, blurred lines and gray flecks blended with the paper. Then, as you scan it, you see in the left-hand corner a thing that is like a branch, part of a tree, balsam or spruce emerging, and to the right, halfway up what ought to be a gentle slope, a small frame house. In the background, there is a lake, and beyond that, some low hills. The photograph was taken the day after I drowned. I am in the lake, in the center of the picture, just under the surface. It is difficult to say where precisely, or to say how large or small I am. The effect of water on light is a distortion, but if you look long enough, eventually you will be able to see me. So I think that's gorgeous. So the end of this poem, this big surprise moment where the speaker turns out to already be dead, having drowned in the lake in the picture, was always, has always been special to me, because she says, though she tells us, I am in the lake, in the center of the picture. Just now, notice how exact that sentence is. And I'm going to show you something in just a second. It is difficult to say where precisely, or to say how large or small I am. The effect of water on light is a distortion. But if you look long enough, now I want y'all to notice something at the top of this poem. This is a photograph of me. It was taken some time ago. When was it taken? Some time ago. At first, it seems to be, notice the word seems, a smeared line break print, blurred lines and gray flecks blended with the paper. I have no idea what I'm looking at. But it's told to me as if I'm being, because the sentences are sure of themselves, I think I know. Then as you scan line break, that's a strange line break. That's like that smeared print line break. Then as you scan it, you see in the left-hand corner a thing that is like a branch. There may not be a branch in the left-hand corner, part of a tree, but some, or any tree, emerging into the right halfway up what ought to be a gentle slope, a small frame house. So there's something about this poem that has, ever since I read it, has always made me aware in the world that I might not be looking at what I think I'm looking at. So most recently, I thought about this poem when CeCe Winans was trying to tell us that she met with the Surgeon General, and it wasn't political, as if meeting with that Surgeon General wouldn't be political. Ooh, that girl made me so mad, I wanted to fire her. I was like, who are you lying to, CeCe? Y'all know that broke my heart. So that's an example of that. And then I'll just show you one more poem. This is a poem. Oops. This is a poem by a poet I love, actually. One of my favorite books of poetry is a book called Among the Monarchs by Christine Guerin, Garren. Here it is. This is a poem called The Bride. The Bride. I waited for a long time, long enough that the field trees blossomed, and the animal pastured for years lowered its spine into the grass and died. The pond turned into a sheet of pollen. I waited through the spring, and before that I had waited. And then I walked through the steep grass to see the animal's corpse. And when I walked through the steep grass to see the animal's corpse, there were no maggots, just grass and the wind. A purity you can't imagine. And still, you won't come here with me when I keep smoothing out a place beside me on the granite bench? I think that's fantastic. I'm gonna read it again because I like it. The Bride. I waited for a long time, long enough that the field trees blossomed, and the animal pastured for years lowered its spine into the grass and died. The pond turned into a sheet of pollen. I waited through the spring, and before that I had waited. And when I walked through the steep grass to see the animal's corpse, there were no maggots, just grass and the wind, a purity you can't imagine. And still, you won't come here with me when I keep smoothing out a place beside me on the granite bench? So I think that that is really well done. So notice, this is not openly in any way a protest poem. But if you have a catalog of poetry in your head, every one of those poems are of use to you in a moment of protest. So when I think about so many people's relationship to this nation, I think about, I waited for a long time, long enough that the field trees blossom. And I think about, and still you won't come here with me? When I keep smoothing out a place beside me on the granite bench. And I feel often to this nation, and I imagine many people do, I feel like the bride in this poem. Okay, so I'll read just a few of my poems because I think there's some time for that. A little time. I'll just read a couple. There's a poem called Bullet Points. I wrote it after finding out about and being confounded by the deaths of a very long list of people who have supposedly committed suicide while in police custody. This happened actually recently again in Louisiana. There was a young man who was handcuffed by police, but found dead in his own car. And I'm not remembering his name right now, and I feel bad about that. This happened also in Louisiana to Victor White III, who supposedly shot himself in the upper back after having been handcuffed, after having been patted down while sitting in the backseat of a police car. Jesus Huerta in North Carolina, who supposedly shot himself in the back corner of his head while handcuffed after having been patted down, shot himself in the back corner of his head from on the walk from the police cruiser to the building where he was to be booked. So I'll read it for you now. Bullet points. I will not shoot myself in the head, and I will not shoot myself in the back, and I will not hang myself with a trash bag. And if I do, I promise you, I will not do it in a police car while handcuffed or in the jail cell of a town I only know the name of because I have to drive through it to get home. Yes, I may be at risk, but I promise you, I trust the maggots who live beneath the floorboards of my house to do what they must to any carcass, more than I trust an officer of the law of the land to shut my eyes like a man of God might, or to cover me with a sheet so clean my mother could have used it to tuck me in. When I kill me, I will do it the same way most Americans do. I promise you, cigarette smoke, or a piece of meat on which I choke, or so broke I freeze in one of these winters we keep calling worst. I promise if you hear of me dead anywhere near a cop, then that cop killed me. He took me from us and left my body, which is, no matter what we've been taught, greater than the settlement a city can pay a mother to stop crying, and more beautiful than the new bullet fished from the folds of my brain. And I'll read you a couple of the sonnets in the book, starting with the title poem, The Tradition. Aster, nasturtium, delphinium, we thought fingers in dirt meant it was our dirt, learning names in heat, in elements classical philosophers said could change us. Stargazer, foxglove, summer seemed to bloom against the will of the sun, which news reports claimed flamed hotter on this planet than when our dead fathers wiped sweat from their necks. Cosmos, baby's breath. Men like me and my brothers filmed what we planted for proof we existed before too late. Sped the video to see blossoms brought in seconds, colors you expect in poems where the world ends. Everything cut down. John Crawford, Eric Garner, Mike Brown. A young man. We stand together on our block, me and my son, neighbors saying our face is the same, but I know he's better than me. When other children move toward my daughter, he lurches like a brother meant to put them down. He is a bodyguard on the playground. He won't turn apart from her, empties any enemy, leaves them flimsy, me confounded. I never fought for so much. I calmed my daughter when I could cradle my daughter. My son swaggers about her. He won't have to heal a girl. He won't let free. They are so small. And I still am a young man. In him lives my black and anger made red. They play. He is not yet incarcerated. There's just maybe two more. There's a poem called The Water Lilies. The water lilies. They open in the day and close at night. They are good at appearances. They are white. I judge them, judge the study they make of themselves, aspirational beings, fake if you ask me. If you ask me, I'll say no. Thank you. I don't need to watch what goes, only imagining itself seen. Don't need to see them yawn their thin mouths and feed on light, absolute and unmoved. They remind me of Black people who see the movie about slaves and exit saying how they would have fought to whip Legree with his own whip and walked away from the plantation, their eyes raised to the sun without going blind. And this is a poem called The Card Tables. Stop playing. You do remember the card tables. Slick stick figures like men with low-cut fades, short but standing straight because we bent them into weak display. What didn't we want? What wouldn't we claim? How perfectly each surface was made for throwing or dropping or slamming a necessary portion of our pay. And how could any of us get by with one in the way? Didn't that bare square ask to be played on, beaten in the head, then folded, then put away? Also, we could call ourselves straight. Also, we could call ourselves safe now that there was more room, a little more space. So, thank you. Thank y'all.
Wow.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm happy to take any questions. I'll look at the. Maybe I should look at the. Maybe I should look at the chat.
I will.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That was wonderful. That was.
Thank you.
I. For a few of them, I was almost in tears. So I didn't expect that this evening.
Really like that. Poets like that.
I'm gonna give a moment if anyone wants to kind of let these words marinate and put questions in the chat. I do have a couple of questions to kind of launch us in, but please feel free to add your questions or comments as we go. You know, the thing, I've got a bunch of questions written down, but I kind of want to dive into one in particular because you started by saying you tend not to think of your work in this role of activism. You know, you do what you do and you do it very well.
Yeah.
But as I was thinking about, you know, I'm not a poet, but I love to read it. And I'm more of a scholar. And so David Orr and his connection between poetry and politics, and considering the state of the world that we're in right now, you know, you said that when you think about the catalog, every poem might not be a protest poem, but any one of them can be used as such when the time arises. So I just want to know if you can dissect that a little bit more for us and what your thoughts are with those.
Say it one more time, just the last part.
What are your thoughts on the idea of poetry as political?
I think it is. Part of the reason it is because it includes language. And I understand that, you know, W.B. Du Bois said all art is propaganda. I've heard Sonia Sanchez said, you know, all art either questions or supports the status quo. So there's a way that whenever we're reading a poem and we are moved and it does have an impact, if the poem's any good, I mean, if it's really done what it's supposed to do, it's not just going to be about feeling. It's going to be about having a feeling such that we're moved to a change in mind, right? So there's one, at one level, it's good to cry. Like, I'm all for tears. I'm here for it. But there is a way that we want those tears to make a difference to the thought. It's one thing to cry, but it's another thing to cry and say, why am I crying? What happened to me? Why did this poem do that to me? And then when you start answering that question, you're in a different place from feeling. You're in a place of thinking. And once you get to a place of thinking, then that will change your action. So we start with feeling, we move to thinking, and then we move to action. And I think that's the case for all poems. And then if the poems aren't doing that, then that's the case. That's still a political move because they haven't done that work. They haven't had whatever a poem needs to change my way of living. So I think poems are political. But I also, I think of that the same way I think about breathing. Like, I think it's really important that I breathe, but I've noticed that when I think about breathing, it actually becomes harder to breathe. But if I don't think about it, I don't have any problem with it. But as soon as I talk about it, I'm like, it's like I want to see it happen. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? So that's sort of, that's what I think about poems as political. And maybe I think about that because of who I am and where I'm from. Like, maybe it's easy for me and more difficult for other people who are from other kinds of positions to understand poetry as political, but I just haven't read one that I didn't think wasn't, when I read poems by white people, I know they're white. I know, we read poems by Black people, we call that Black poetry. But, I read a lot of white poetry. And nobody seems to call it that, but I'm very aware that it's out there. Do you know what I'm saying? And I see the ways in which those poems, no matter who's written them, but I see the ways in which poems sort of speak to what has already been done and maybe are not new. In spite of the fact that it's a new poem, maybe it is not new. And also ways in which people are really questioning themselves. There's a poem, I don't have it with me. I would read it for you. I'm doing it, thesis hours of independent study with a student. He wrote this poem. And it's so gorgeous because he starts very clearly while writing the poem, questioning everything about the way he grew up. And I'm like, oh, that's new. You know what I mean? And so that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for when I read poems. And that's what I think of when I think of that which is political. I think it's necessary to understand that. I think in order to write the poems, you can't think about it though. You have to be breathing. I mean, we have to, I hope y'all don't mind me talking, but I'll just keep talking. We have to create a world. I mean, if we're in whatever art we're interested in, we have to create a world in which we are living with that art in a real way. I mean, this is part of what I love about Kava. Like, Kava lives with poetry. It's like poetry everywhere. And the best the best example of an art that we sort of already have this relationship with is music. Like, generally, when we're working out, when we're washing dishes, if we're in the shower, music is playing. We're driving, music is playing. Some people listen to NPR, but they just like being depressed, I guess. Do you know what I mean? But many of us, if I'm not talking to a friend of mine on the phone and I'm not actively working on something, music is playing. It's necessary for me to get from one room of my house to another to have a soundtrack. Do you know what I'm saying? So the question is, and nobody ever says, I hate music. But the truth is, if you look at the songs you love, that is such a small fraction of the songs. If you look at the poems you love, that is a very small fraction of the poems. But I meet people who will tell me I hate poetry. It's so strange because as soon as they tell me that, I'm like, you don't like any poem? And suddenly they like recite We Real Cool, or recite The Road Not Taken, or recite, what is that poem by E.E. Cummings about the heart? They'll like, they suddenly have, and I'm like, wait, I thought you hated poetry. They're like, oh, I just like that poem. I'm like, but this poem has literally sustained you for the last 50 years, man, on the plane next to me. And you're telling me you hate poetry. You maybe just need to read more of it. You experience more of it. You have it around you, and it becomes a part of your life. And if it is a part of your life, you wouldn't help but see the political implications of it in your life, you know.
So that makes me think of you had another statement while reading that was, you might not be looking at what I'm looking at. Like I might not be seeing what I'm seeing, and how important this the craft of, or the art of, questioning is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Joe Biden. I don't want to be, never mind. I was about to do something that sounded, I actually am a person who believes that there's a time for everything. And like now is not the time to be critical of Joe Biden. So when I say this, I don't mean to be critical of Joe Biden. But like, like I wish like Joe Biden would have been saying inshallah like forever. Like, don't wait till the debate to suddenly say inshallah out of nowhere. Because then I'm going to be like, wait, why'd you say that, Joe? What's up, Joe? When'd you learn that word? Do y'all know it? So that's what I mean. Like, but when I was a younger person, I mean, I'm not Muslim, so maybe I wouldn't have had it. But if I were, I do know this about myself as a younger person. I'd be like, he said inshallah, I'm voting for him. I mean, I think y'all should vote for Joe Biden. Don't get me wrong. I'm sorry, y'all. Most of y'all, I guess y'all in Indiana, so y'all looking at me like, for what? But do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I think, but I think that's the kind of thing that I have noticed in the world because of poems. Poems made me a better thinker about the truth. Do you follow what I'm saying? I mean, poems actually I think, can make you a better lover, like make you better at romance, make you better at relating your real vulnerable heart to a real live human, not a poem human, not a human being in a poem, but a real person. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it does that because you see so much of the bull in the world that suddenly you are aware that you're spouting it. So you can't spout that when you're trying to fall in love. You find yourself in the love situation wanting somebody who's not going to spout the BS because you've been reading poems. And you're able to recognize when somebody's spouting the BS. And you're able to recognize when you're doing it. Do you follow? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of, I don't know what I was answering there, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah, we've got a question from one of the guests here. It says, what didn't we want?
What wouldn't we claim?
What wouldn't we claim? Can you talk about these kinds of negative prophetic constructions, and which appear frequently as little bouquets throughout your work?
Yeah, you know who's really good at this is the poet James Allen Hawley. Has a book of poetry called Now You're the Enemy. We went to graduate school together and we worked on our books together, and we were always sort of fascinated. This is sort of poet nerdlandia, so get ready. But we were always fascinated by what negatives could do in a poem, what saying not could do in a poem. And so I do find myself employing that a great deal because I can tell you something wasn't there, but then because I mentioned it, it is in your mind. So while it is not in the dramatic situation of the poem, it still exists because the poem exists. It's created a space for you in your mind. So because I can do that, I can do two things at once. I can create an absence and tell you what is going on in that absence, but I can also create a presence that is not in the poem, but that is in your mind. So depending on what you think about that presence, you can already begin to have an emotional reaction to the lack of it. So you know that that presence isn't there, and so you're already missing it because I told you it's not there. If a poem began, of course we didn't have a father. We lived on Caroline Street. If that were the first two lines of a poem, then we know daddy's not in the poem, but we're already missing him. Mm-hmm. And missing him all the more because of the word, of course. We think about not just that one father that we didn't have. But there seems to be a fatherless community out here on Caroline Street, right? Even just in that moment. And so using the not, I think, can sort of create history. You know, when you're working with poems, or when I'm working with poems, I want to do a lot in a little bit of space. So I can't write all of history, but I can, through something like that, through a slight move like that, pack even just a single line with a lot of history. And I'm interested in how much I can do in a small space.
When you speak of that, you know, you can't write all of history, you're trying to pack a lot into a little. And you also spoke about, you know, going from feeling to thinking to action.
Mm-hmm.
As a poet, what is that actionable thing for you?
Well, one of them I actually just named, right? You know, it's how you make love. But another one is, one of them, depending on, you know, what your talents are, one of them can quite literally be, because this is what became important to me in reading poems, is paying attention to what my power was. Like my literal, like, oh, I can make this happen, right? I can like make this happen. I didn't have this kind of power before May, but now I'm in a position where the people at Ryan White want to talk to me about putting poems in HIV/AIDS facilities where people might get their diagnosis. Now, what would, you know, obviously this is partially personal. What would my life have been like if there was a poem on the wall when I got my diagnosis? Do you know what I'm saying? So that's I mean, but that's action brought about by being a reader of poetry. That's real life something I can do and ask them if they can make happen. And hopefully they will. I mean, if they don't, I'll just ask somebody else. You know, I like to dance, so I'll go to the club, and y'all don't know anything about this because you're good people. But when you go to the club, they give you, when you're leaving the club, if you're at a good club, you might get a baggie, and that baggie would have in it a flyer for the next night you're supposed to go out, a lollipop, and some condoms, and you know, if you're real lucky, so a little bit of lubrication too. So what I would like to be in that baggie is a poem. You know what I'm saying? Like plenty of poems could fit in something. There are really great poems that could fit in. I literally have looked them up and made a short chapbook of poems that could fit in that baggie. Do you follow? But I do that kind of, I mean, in a way, I guess I think of that. I mean, I guess that's a kind of activist work, but I don't like calling it that because then, you know, I get nervous. And I would rather just live my life and think of, and just be doing, you know, a lot of what we're calling activism is just doing the right thing, you know?
Yeah,
Like, don't be crazy, like do the right thing.
Yeah.
I should say, one of the things, you know, poetry's greatest attribute is that it moves us from numbness. So when we talk about activism, or we talk about going from feeling to thought to action, I'm not just talking about a change of mind. Like I'm not talking about just going from racist to pro-Black. Like I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about going from nothing to something, right? In a nation that means to make us, and we are very purposely, like this is real. I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's all around you. You can sound like one too. It's easy to see that we are over and over again being told to be numb. Um, and poetry doesn't allow for that. Poem means for us to be moved.
Wonderful. This is, I have another comment that just says, Rita Dove says, the job of the poet is to remind people language has integrity, which vibrates at the same frequency as what you're saying about poems helping us spot the BS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's a link to one of James's poems. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This has been
I would listen to it.
just beautiful. We're at our close. If anyone has like a last minute question or comment that they want to throw into the chat, we're at our close. But Jericho, do you have any last words before I close this out?
No, I really appreciate y'all having me here. Thank y'all for, I know it's such a strange time. So thank y'all for coming, and thank you, Kava. People are knocking on my door. I must owe somebody some money.
This was great. So let me do our last little bit here. So the BCC is not done for the semester. We are still here. Next week, we have 2 phenomenal programs for you. On October 6th, we're talking with a library specialist, library collection specialist, who has a beautiful presentation on the drag queens of Indiana Avenue and their lost history. And we also have a series on race and entrepreneurship on Thursday and Friday. So please feel free to join us back for those, again, virtual sessions. And I'm going to drop the link. Oh, wow.
Isn't that nice?
What?
We'll see who it's from. Somebody's probably trying to get forgiven. Somebody probably broke my heart. Oh, no, somebody's just nice. Dang.
And we have the link to the survey in the chat. If you'll take a couple of minutes, very quick, just tell us about your experience and what else we can be doing to participate and come alongside our community at this time. So thank you all very, very much. Jericho, just a round of applause to you. Thank you so very much. This was just lovely. I appreciate your time. Wonderful
Thank you.
to speak with you.
Thank you. Y'all are so kind. Thank you. I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.